Hey, what's up? This is Antifreeze here. Now, I've been thinking recently about doing some more Adidas related stuff because I feel like historically this channel has been very Nike focused. So I was having a look through all their various recent collections, and there are a few things that kind of stuck out to me in terms of techwear related or kind of tech aesthetic clothing. So first up, there's a couple of lines that will probably come as no surprise to any of you. First of all being the Y3 SS18 collection, which Adidas unveiled relatively recently. Like a lot of the things before it, they've got quite a lot of futuristic cuts, definitely a bit of a tech aesthetic going on. I'd also say definitely keep an eye out for Adidas white mountaineering stuff. Again, they recently released some images of their new collection, which looks pretty good, definitely worth checking out. It's probably the most similar thing that Adidas have to Nike ACG in terms of collab with a relatively high-end outerwear brand to create stuff which is a little bit more reasonably priced, using that dual branding as well. Both of those things are relatively long running, but I have noticed that as of late, Adidas have started introducing some light technical features into their clothing, which I feel like haven't really been that present up until now. Stuff like kind of thumb holes, like in their ZNE collection, I think it was. More kind of extended cuts, more drapey things, just playing around with fits a little bit more. All that kind of thing. But what really got me thinking, and the reason for the title of this video, was last week, in fact, when I was taking a look at the NMD bag and having a look through some of the other NMD clothing and accessories, especially some of their new stuff that they've just released. There are definitely some recognizable techwear elements in this new NMD collection. Definitely not to the same extent as their white mountaineering collab, and I think aesthetically not necessarily as much as their Y3 stuff, and not really as much as Nike ACG either, but I do think that in quite a lot of the pieces in the collection, there is kind of something that resembles a techwear aesthetic. I think to your average person, this stuff is going to be a lot more ready to wear, and much easier to bring into a more average streetwear fit as opposed to having to build a lot of other techwear pieces around it. And that's definitely reflected in the price, which is perhaps a little bit more than you might pay for Adidas stuff, but not as much as ACG, White Mountaineering, Y3, and certainly not as much as those high-end brands from which those collabs are taken. So that alone is perhaps a signal that Adidas have some kind of interest in techwear, but I think the most interesting thing about this little collection that they've released is the fact that it carries the NMD branding. Discounting the Yeezys, the Adidas NMD has probably been their most successful silhouette over the last 18 months. It really has got a lot of wide stream appeal. If you have any interest in streetwear, then you probably will have seen people wearing them. You'll certainly know what they are. You might even have a pair yourself. They really are incredibly pervasive, and they've started with that kind of fashiony streetwear crowd, but moved so far into the mainstream that pretty much everyone and their mum's got a pair by now. Adidas could have played it incredibly safe when expanding their NMD line to clothing and accessories to try and expand on their success and of course increase their revenue. We could have very easily seen just plain jumpers with some NMD branding on, like a pretty standard looking bag with that sort of plug kind of strapped on the bottom somehow, all that kind of thing. It would have been, vaguely on-trend streetwear, referencing something which is still pretty high in demand to your average person, and people probably would have bought it because it would have had that recognizable branding. Instead, they've looked at more futuristic shapes and cuts and the odd technical innovation as well, and kind of brought them down, or some would say watered them down, into the realm of accessibility to your average person, both stylistically and price-wise. And then adding that branding, which is associated with very, very mainstream footwear, they're both introducing elements of techwear style and pairing it with something extremely familiar to most people. This feels like the equivalent of Adidas saying, hey guys, we think this is the direction that mainstream fashion is going. What's not so clear, however, is how far Adidas are being reactive or how far they're being speculative. Are they looking at things like the success of the recent Nike ACG collection and thinking perhaps this is a style that a lot of people are now ready to become interested in? Or Are they thinking ahead for the future and thinking, maybe this isn't really a style which is that mainstream right now, but if we push that along with some recognizable branding, then we can change the way that people think, and then we've got the kind of first to market mainstream product. It could very well be either, but whether it's a good thing that Adidas are potentially signaling an increase in the popularity of techwear is up to you. On the one hand, we might see an increase in the availability of reasonably priced clothing with a somewhat techwear style, both from Adidas, and if this stuff is successful, then other rival manufacturers will no doubt be wanting to do the same thing. However, that greater availability will inevitably dilute the style. Some of those high-end techwear features, and almost certainly performance, will be lost in that kind of transition from niche to mainstream. I mean, you can already see with this NMD collection, not kind of any Gore-Tex or any true performance fabrics in sight. So it could be the way that that is the way that techwear goes to the mainstream, by rejecting those high-performance materials, and that enabling them to drop the price of things to a more manageable level to your average person. You could certainly argue that for that reason, this collection, and perhaps anything that follows it around this kind of price point, is not really true techwear, stuff which might have some of the look, but not really any of the performance. Techwear may gain more mainstream appeal and more people wanting to adopt the style because of this NMD collection, and perhaps other stuff that follows, but at the cost of releasing quite a niche aesthetic into the minds of the public, and how far, of course, that aesthetic will be diluted and those performance features, those technical fabrics, will be removed in favour of keeping things accessible and keeping prices down. Ultimately, that kind of thing is at the heart of techwear, so if that's removed, it'll be interesting to see A, how far the mainstream will still pick that up, and B, how far that will alienate the core audience. Will it push them away from techwear altogether, or will there be an even greater surge towards those higher priced, kind of true techwear brands and pieces? So those were my thoughts really on some of Adidas's recent stuff. I appreciate that there is quite a lot of speculation here. I can only go on the stuff that I see, the information that I have available, but those were really just some of the things that jumped out to me. Anyway, let me know what you guys think of this video. If you've got any thoughts on this, have you guys got any evidence, or have you seen any kind of examples of techwear stuff being brought into the mainstream, or do you think that this style is going to kind of stay relatively niche for now? If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. I really do appreciate it. And of course, I will catch you guys in the next one. Shout out to Really for complimenting my lovely wrinkly sack in the last video. And to Fluctuati for calling me out on mixing sportswear brands, which of course you should never ever do under penalty of death. But if you all find it in your heart to forgive me, you can watch some more videos, which will be up there. And of course, you can always subscribe by hitting that little button over on the side.